Let me quickly get over to Donald. What do you think about that assessment? It's not a defense of accidental shooting, trying to work it down to voluntary manslaughter, and therefore all the prior bad acts are not relevant here, and perhaps an error. Look, Judge Fidler, I know him. I'm sure, Donald, you know him. One of the most respected jurists in Los Angeles, a very reasoned and reasonable judge with a good rate on appeal of not getting reversed. But prior acts, that's a tough one. Defense attorneys often can challenge that.
They can, but in California, unfortunately, there's been a gradual expansion of this type of evidence. As we all know, years ago, this evidence would never make it into any court of law. California had the camel's nose in the tent early in the 90s with the domestic violence statutes, and there just seems to be an expansion. I'm not quite as confident that this is a reversible error as my colleague is. But it is troubling because of the fact that this, although I have to say this, is how do we know that it isn't going to be a defense of accident or mistake? If Spector never takes the stand, I believe that the defense could always rely on that and say, look, in the alternative, if you don't think that he intentionally killed, it could have been an accident.
Yeah, but I think we've got a problem, Donald, if we've already heard from the two defense attorneys in the case. Now, I want to bring in our California counsel on this case, because this case, of course, is a California case, Donald Schweitzer, and it concerns me a bit to have all these foreigners flooding in. I always think it's wise, and there are 6 lawyers on the team, and the majority of the team is from California, but I'm concerned a bit that the 2 lead lawyers are from New York.
I always have that concern, too. I think that every courthouse in America has its own customs. You've got the players that know the judges and the district attorneys, and it's somewhat of a disadvantage when you get even a real famous attorney like Mr. Coulter to come in here who's a fish out of water. On the other hand, remember, California is a very metropolis, type of place. We're used to people with funky haircuts and big personalities and things like that. So I think that these jurors are going to be way more tolerant than what your average viewer here is going to see or feel like when they're watching this trial.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And we cover cases across the country, Donald, and so we really do see great variance in the styles of the lawyers, the looks, and also of the clients and the prosecutors. It varies tremendously. So let me bring Donald Schweitzer into this. Of course, Donald, in every state it's a little bit different. In some states, attempted suicide is illegal. Assisting a suicide can be deliberate. Accidental and suicide don't really go together, kind of an oxymoron. So I'm not so sure about that defense. You think they should back away from that and just go with plain old-fashioned accident?
Well, it's just how they chose to phrase this to the jury. You're right. Legally speaking, there's no such thing as an accidental suicide. It's either intentional or it's an accident. But they're trying to communicate a message to the jury, and it's just the way that they chose to express that.
Well, it's a bad way. It's a bad way. I know you're supposed to be my defense attorney, so feel free to fight with me.
I disagree with you because I think that they have the liberty of trying this case using the words that they want in order to convey messages and things like that. A lot of times we purposely misstate words in order to convey a message. And they wanted to make a point right at the beginning that this was an accident, and there may not have been a better way to do that than to say it was also a suicide, meaning she did it to herself.
And my concern is, and I hear you loud and clear about the semantics of cases, I agree with Bruce Cutler, for example, we shouldn't be calling this a murder. We shouldn't be calling her a victim, because none of that has been proved when you consider the defense theory of the case. My concern, though, Donald, about suicide is it suggests that this woman went off to a stranger's home to kill herself, and now they have to back away from it, and you don't want to be backing away from anything. You're already on the defense.
You make it a very good point to the extent that that's what I would do as the prosecutor, is to say, hey, what a weird place to choose to have a suicide, right? You just met this guy, you go to his house, and within 2 hours you decide, hey, it's time to do it. But I think that there's plenty of time in the jury for them to turn this thing around and to really convey what they're saying, is that this woman was acting kind of crazy. She had a gun in her hand, she's dancing around, the gun was pointed to her head, and oops, she had an accident and shot herself.
Right. Okay, so let me come over to you, Donald Schweitzer. What about the best defense?
Well, the best defense for the prosecution is clearly these prior quote-unquote victims. If the prosecution does its job and paints Mr. Spector as this wild, crazy guy who likes to drink and then point his gun and wave it around, and he just does it on a regular basis, that's extremely damaging to him. The statement from the chauffeur I'm not that concerned with, because It could have been a circumstance where the fountain was too loud. He was sitting in the car. He's probably lethargic from eating Twinkies and whatever else he's doing.
Don't say Twinkies.
You know, there are language problems. That doesn't concern me as much as these people right here. And I think that the defense is doing a very effective job of being soft with her, but taking her apart. You know, one of the questions I have here is why in the world wasn't this charge filed against Mr. Spector if he's pointing a gun at this woman and pistol whipping her and things like that? You know, she doesn't have the power to file or not file. It's not her decision. If the evidence was substantial enough, and if there's cameras on this estate viewing all this stuff, why didn't the police go in there and hook him up? And why wasn't he prosecuted back then?
So
there was a problem with the evidence back then.
Are you saying, Donald, in this case, that the best defense is to just challenge them at every turn, point for point, and then pound on reasonable doubt, rather than developing your own theory concretely about what went on behind closed doors? Yeah,
you know, we can't forget that Mr. Spector is an eccentric and that he engages in some pistol waving and things like that. You wouldn't have any credibility if you said that never happened. But to take apart each witness and to show the differences between those incidents and this alleged incident right here is their way of attacking this case. And they're doing a good job so far. Contrary to what people have said so far in this program, I think this witness has come apart, and there's been some major points made by the defense. All right, well, that's why we bring you guys on. What a team.